now called to order. And let me acknowledge the virtual presence of Senator Amy Marcos, who is the chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee. And it's very timely that she is here, that because we will be talking about the guide bill, which aims to jumpstart our economy, and her inputs are very valuable in the crafting of this measure. So before we continue on, let me direct our committee secretary to acknowledge our resource persons for this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. For the public hearing of the Committee on Banks, joint with the Committee on Corporate Corporations, Ways and Means and Finance, we have the following resource persons. As of the moment, we have Ms. Christine Masigan from the DOF. And we have Ms. Maria Teresa S. Habitan, the Assistant Secretary of DOF. We have Ms. Rosaria B. De Leon, Treasurer, Bureau of Treasury. From the Bureau of Internal Revenue, we have Ms. Marisa O. Cabreros, Deputy Commissioner, Legal Group. Mr. Larry V. M. Barcelo, Assistant Commissioner, Legal Service. Mr. Manuel V. Mapoy, Assistant Commissioner, Large Taxpayer Service. And we have Ms. Ruby Ruth Magagnob. From the Securities and Exchange Commission, we have Commissioner Efiro Luis Amatong, Attorney Kathleen Gatdula, Attorney Diane Marie Lucero, Attorney Kenneth Joy A. Quinoyo. Sorry if I say it wrong. Attorney Avril Bries, Attorney Glory Grace Arugay, and Ms. Maria Cristina Villaroya. From the Land Bank of the Philippines, we have Mr. Gian Angelo Dumalagan and Elcid Pangilinan. From the Development Bank of the Philippines, we have Vice President Mario T. Morales, SMIVV Canlas, or it's probably Senior Manager. From the NEDA, from the National Economic and Development Authority, we have Assistant Secretary Carlos Bernardo O. Abad Santos, Mr. David Mangalindan, Ms. Maria Antoinette Pasquin. From the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, we have Governor Benjamin Diokno, Ms. Ann Caroline Bugayong Cruz, Ms. Cristina Villaroya, Ms. Katrina Limbonhay Aldon. From the Department of Trade and Industry, we have Director Jerry Clavesillas of the Bureau of Small and Medium Enterprise Development. From the Department of Agriculture, we have Mr. Ezrael Manzano. From the Philippine Competition Commission, we have Attorney Jared Rivera. From the GCG, or the Governance Commission for GOCCs, we have Attorney Carlo P. Murcia, Mr. John Arnold Talusan, Attorney Michael Balmoria, and Attorney Jean Carl Tupas. From the Commission on Audit, we have Ms. Marie France Hazel S. Azevedo, Attorney Fabian K. De Los Santos, Mr. Rosita B. Titular, Mr. Muhammad Muarif S. Balang, and Attorney Christine S. Go. That's all for the meantime, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ComSec. And we're also quite blessed today that our good minority floor leader is present with us. Definitely his inputs will be very valuable to, to the discussion of this bill. In the spirit of transparency and full disclosure, I just want to put on record that some of my family members are engaged in the hospitality and tourism business. This is the Waterfront Philippines Incorporated, which is a publicly traded company registered in the Philippine Stock Exchange. And upon very close scrutiny of their financial statements, this company is by no means in a state of temporary solvency. So in other words, this company will not be eligible or will not be qualified under this proposed law. And more so, this company will not benefit from the provisions of the proposed measure. So I just want to put that on record, just for, in the spirit of transparency and full disclosure. Today we'll be tackling three bills: Senate Bill number 1646, introduced by Senator Amy Marcos; Senate Bill number 2003, introduced by Senate President Tito Soto; and Senate Bill number 2048, introduced by Senator Bongo. We will also be considering the approved House bill on the said measure. This is House Bill number 7749. All measures um, have the same title. This is an act providing for government financial institutions unified initiatives to distress enterprises for economic recovery. GUIDE for short. So this is the topic on hand right now. So just for a brief opening statement, last year in 2020, our economy lost about 1.5 trillion in economic value. This is approximately 9.5% of our GDP. And with this economic loss comes with massive unemployment consequences. Approximately 3 million Filipinos lost their jobs at the end of 2020. This is about a 7.2% reduction in our employment figures. Government undertook several legislative action to arrest the decline in our economy and arrest the decline in our employment figures. Congress, through the House of Representatives and the Senate, enacted Bayanihan 1, Bayanihan 2, recently CREATE, and recently FIST, all geared towards jump-starting our economy. However, we still need to inject some more liquidity, especially to our small and medium enterprises, micro, small and medium enterprises. So the eventual goal of this bill, the guide bill, is to give government additional firepower to lend to our MSMEs and to also eventually save jobs that can be lost because of this because of the onslaught of the pandemic. So today we will be inquiring from our executive counterparts on how GUIDE, in plain and simple terms, how GUIDE can help our MSMEs, how GUIDE can jumpstart our economy, and most importantly, how GUIDE can save jobs until we recover and until we see the light of day from this pandemic. So today we'll be going into detail and going into detail to discuss the salient and the important points of this bill. So with that, I would like to request from our good minority floor leader any opening statements.
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I have no opening statement. I have read the pertinent documents, briefing papers, and I look forward to a discussion on this bill, so we can proceed to hear the resource persons. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and definitely the opening statement of our of the chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee. So we call on the chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee, Senator Amy Marcos.
Yes, thank you very much. I filed the first of these bills in early August of 2020. In early June of 2020, fully aware that the pandemic would cost the Philippine economy very, very deeply. So there are certain distinctions while all these bills seek to strengthen the capacity of GFIs, particularly the PGC, the LBP, and the DBP, to provide needed assistance to MSMEs. There are a few salient distinctions in my bill, perhaps because it was so early, perhaps because we had a different considerations. Unang-una, naiiba yung bill ko pagkat yung mga bangko bound pa rin by prudential loan standards. na hindi na pinapansin dun sa ibang bill, ano? And this is in recognition of the fact that despite the BSP's cutting policy rates by a total of, what is it now, 200 basis points yata, in addition to other creative schemes, such as considering the MSME loans as part of the reserve requirement of the banks, the bank lending has fallen by 0.7% in 2020. And the amounts continue to fall. So despite the very aggressive and proactive stance of our BSP governor, and we welcome Ben Jokno here, it appears that there really is a limit to monetary measures in a crisis of this gravity and width. The inability of banks to extend loans to micro and small enterprises is really not captured by the data alone, as banks are supposed to allocate 8% of their loan portfolio to MSMEs. Secondly, there's a distinction in my bill in that the funding is through a trust fund instead of direct capital infusion, allowing them to grant loans to MSMEs without significantly endangering the funds of depositors, which has become a concern in these troubled times. Thirdly, the distinction also is that there's no need to establish a special holding company to provide equity infusion. So these are some of the differences, but as we all know, at the end of the day, it will be for the Senate, for the banks, for the administration to determine exactly who the strategically important companies are that need to be rescued in the face of this crisis, given scarce resources and many conflicting requirements. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and we look forward to a spirited discussion.
Thank you, Senator Amy. And you pointed out several important items that we need to discuss, especially on the safeguards. The exemption from prudential standards is definitely one of the items that we need to expound on. And how can this exemption impact the health of the banking sector? With that, with the kind indulgence of the good minority floor leader and Senator Amy, we will now proceed to the presentation of our counterparts in the executive branch. We will call on the DOF to present their presentation, and then later on we'll move to the Bangko Sentral for their inputs. So we call on our National Treasurer, Ms. Rosalia De Leon.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. With your kind indulgence, because Governor Diokno would also be having the monetary board, there's a PMB at 9, I understand. If we can also first hear the statement from the good governor, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. We'll call on Governor Ben Jokno for his presentation. Yes, Governor, you can. You're now recognized.
Subcommittee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies for giving the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas the opportunity to share its insights and position on the proposed enactment of the Guide Bill. The BSP appreciates the time and effort of the Senator and this committee to facilitate the timely enactment of the Guide Bill as part of the national government's economic recovery strategy. The COVID-19 pandemic, while primarily a health crisis, has adversely affected the global economy at an unprecedented level. The Philippines was not exempted from the impact of this pandemic, as its economy contracted by 9.5% in 2020, the sharpest decline since 1946, breaking 21 years of uninterrupted growth. During the height of the lockdown, the national government and the BSP worked hand in hand to provide a series of stimulus and relief measures. The BSP, for its part, issued time-bound regulatory and operational relief to institutions under its supervision to enable them to provide credit to the economy. We also granted short-term advances to the national government to support its efforts in battling the impact of the pandemic. While the economy is on its track to recovery, it's too early to celebrate. Much needs to be done if we want to rebuild better. Meanwhile, the continuous imposition of the lockdown, now close to a year, has taken a toll on the finances of micro, small, and medium enterprises, and a large number of strategically important industries. MSMEs, as you know, are the backbone of the Philippine economy. They account for 2/3 of the country's workforce. Hence, there is a compelling need for legislative measures aimed at supporting the MSMEs and the strategically important companies. So along with the Department of Finance, the Bureau of Treasury, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Land Bank of the Philippines, the Development Bank of the Philippines, and other relevant government agencies, we fully support the objectives of the Guide Bill. When enacted, the Guide Bill will boost the capacity of Land Bank and DBP to support our MSMEs through expanded lending activities, thereby ensuring the availability of credit to this sector. This bill will supplement the financial assistance to MSMEs that this Congress has granted through the Bayanihan laws. Further, the Guide Bill will empower Land Bank and DBP to create a special holding company to rehabilitate strategically important companies facing temporary solvency issues owing to the pandemic. Under the bill, Land Bank and DBP will be authorized to participate in the financial and capital markets by allowing investments in the strategically important companies through the special holding company. The strategically important companies, as defined in the bill, refer to companies that are nationally significant or those with high economic returns or high unemployment potential. You may recall that this Congress recently passed the Financial Institutions Strategic Transfer Act, or the FIST Act. The Guide Bill will complement the FIST Act. The Guide Bill, along with the other priority legislative measures of the economic team, will enable the national government to cover and accelerate the economic recovery of a wide range of sectors across the country. So the BSP, together with the economic manager, shares the view that the enactment of the Guide Bill will alleviate the potential scarring effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and allow the Philippines to rebuild better. Again, we thank the subcommittee for giving BSP the opportunity to participate in the process of enactment of this landmark legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor Ben. We also recognize the virtual presence of Senator Cynthia Villar. Good morning, ma'am. With that, we'd like to open the floor for questions. May we ask our respective senators if they have any questions to our BSP governor?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Frank.
may I suggest that we allow the other resource persons to make a presentation so that at least we have an entire picture of what the bill is all about. I can understand that the BSP governor may have other commitments, and I do not mind if he has to leave. We can raise questions on the other resource persons, but I would prefer that we hear the other resource persons first before we raise the questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that suggestion, Senator Frank. May we request Governor Ben to, if you have to leave, to assign a representative, a capable representative who can receive questions later on. With that suggestion, we will now go on to the presentation of the Department of Finance.
Good morning, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. Good morning, Senator Franklin Drilon. Good morning, Senator Cynthia Villar. And of course, good morning, Senator Amy Marcos. With the Chairman's permission, may I read the statement of the Secretary of Finance, Carlos Dominguez. We thank the Senate for giving us an opportunity to explain the need for this urgent reform. The Guide Bill is a joint priority of both Congress and the executive branch for passage by June 2021, as reflected in the Common Legislative Agenda for the 18th Congress. In response to this unprecedented global emergency, President Duterte took decisive and necessary measures to protect the lives and livelihoods of Filipinos. However, as community quarantines limited mobility and the risk of COVID-19 transmission, they also hampered economic activities. Businesses incurred a steep price because of these lockdown measures. As mobility declined, so too did revenues. This presented serious cash flow issues that affected the ability of businesses to honor their debts, retain their employees, and sustain operations. Micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, which employ 2/3 of the country's labor force, have suffered due to constrained economic activities and the dip in consumer confidence. Strategically important companies, or SICs, that contribute significantly to the country's gross domestic product have also faced temporary solvency issues due to the pandemic. When businesses close, people lose jobs. When people lose their jobs, overall aggregate demand declines, further threatening the viability of businesses that remain. This is a vicious cycle that calls for urgent government intervention. The threat of a domino effect, especially the case for SICs, whose operations are closely linked with those of other enterprises due to their forward and backward linkages. Even as we roll out the COVID-19 vaccines and the prospect of further economic reopening comes to light, the cash flow issues that businesses faced over the past 12 months pose continued challenges to their solvency. Thus, providing timely and effective assistance to MSMEs and SICs is crucial to ensuring a strong economic recovery. The Government Financial Institutions Unified Initiative to Distress Enterprises for Economic Recovery, or the Guide Bill, aims to strengthen the capacity of the Land Bank of the Philippines and the Development Bank of the Philippines in providing much-needed access to credit and financial assistance to distressed businesses, including MSMEs, SICs, and other businesses affected by the pandemic. Land Bank and DBP will also be allowed to create a special holding company to help rehabilitate SICs heavily affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Equity participation in this special holding company may be held by qualified private sector investors. However, to ensure that the policies and objectives under the proposed bill are effectively carried out, Land Bank and DBP are mandated to maintain at least a majority ownership over the special holding company until such time that they have recovered or will be able to recover their investment. The special holding company will be authorized to invest or place funds in equity, execute convertible loans, or purchase convertible bonds and other securities in the SICs. Guide will ensure that the government's investment directly contributes to job creation and job protection. Guide requires that the number of employees are not reduced beyond a certain level. As a measure against cronyism, SICs are considered nationally significant with high economic returns and high employment potential and are able to demonstrate up and downstream linkages to other firms and industries. To be eligible under Guide, SICs need to show proof of temporary solvency problems due to the pandemic, financial soundness prior to the pandemic, and full and sound financial rehabilitation plan. Guide also limits the ability of investing companies to declare dividends, increase salaries, and other benefits of the board and its senior executive officers, and dilute investments by Land Bank and DBP. GUIDE also protects the government's investment by giving the government a clear exit mechanism. The bill also helps lower the overall cost of borrowing for MSMEs, which complements the MSME credit programs under Bayanihan 2. Government financial institutions will be mandated to expand their credit programs in order to assist affected MSMEs in meeting their liquidity needs. In particular, Land Bank and DBP are mandated to expand their loan programs, rediscount loans, and other credit accommodations COVID-19 affected MSMEs in the agriculture, infrastructure, service, and other manufacturing industries. Taking all this consideration, we think that GUIDE is an efficient and effective method to support our economic recovery. The initial funding required will go a long way in helping our people fight this pandemic. We thank the Senate again for prioritizing this urgent measure. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Thank you. With the kind indulgence of our senators, we'll finish the economic team first. NEDA is also here so that we can round up the presentations of the economic cluster. So we call on NEDA, represented by ASEC Carlo Abad Santos.
Good morning, Your Honors, and we thank the Joint Committee for inviting NEDA to present our thoughts on the GUIDE bills. The LEDAC EXECO met last 18 February 2021 and included the GUIDE bill as one of the 25 priority measures in the common legislative agenda for the 18th Congress. Among these 25 bills, 12 are priority bills, including GUIDE, and these 12 are targeted to be passed by June of this year. Everyone, including the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, agreed with this list. We would like to thank the Senate leadership for agreeing to include GUIDE in the LEDAC Common Legislative Agenda and hope for its swift passage before June this year. Along with the other members of the economic team, we are here to express our full support for GUIDE and to request the Senate to facilitate its speedy approval. The recovery package is mostly in place. First, the 2021 budget has been passed on time. Second, the validity of the 2020 budget and the Bayanihan 2 have been extended. 3, FIST has been enacted into law, and CREATE is on the President's table for signature. The only item left is the passage of GUIDE. Earlier on, Treasurer Leah already outlined the 2 key elements of GUIDE, and again, the objective of which is to give access to credit and financial assistance to MSMEs and strategically important companies affected by the COVID pandemic. The passage of this measure is essential, especially due to COVID-19, which disrupted businesses, livelihoods, and jobs. The road ahead remains challenging, but we continue to see promising signs of recovery. According to DTI, around 90,000 businesses have closed due to lockdowns and weaker demand. Many more are experiencing temporary solvency issues. Despite of the recent gains in the labor market, employment levels are still down by 1.3 million compared to pre-pandemic levels. According to various estimates, overall output or GDP has lost some 1.5 to 3 trillion pesos in 2020. GDP is only projected to return to its pre-pandemic levels by mid-2022 at the earliest. The vaccination program is rolling out, and this will allow us to safely open the economy more and restore jobs and incomes to make our fight against hunger more sustainable. In the meantime, GUIDE can provide much needed access to credit and financial assistance to distressed businesses, including MSMEs SICs, and other businesses affected by the pandemic. The socio-economic impact of GUIDE will be substantial. Assuming a minimum multiplier effect of 8.5, the 10 billion capital infusion will translate to more loans to MSMEs, which will consequently impact on additional gross value added and protect jobs of MSME workers. Our colleagues in the GFI will be presenting their detailed estimates of the impact of GUIDE later on. Again, we also want to emphasize that the bill contains safeguards on and limitations on the special holding company. Among these are, first, investments in investee companies and the total investments in companies belonging to the same industry or sector shall be subject to a ceiling in relation to its net income or capital to avoid undue concentration, risk, and excessive exposure. Number two, the special holding company can only invest in corporations engaged in strategically important industries or sectors that are experiencing temporary solvency issues because of the pandemic. And lastly, investments can be in the form of limited equity participation, convertible debt, and other securities that are acceptable to DBP and Land Bank. Again, thank you very much, and we hope you can consider all of this and help us move the bill forward.
Thank you, Sec. We now open the floor to meron pa ba? We'll now open the floor for questions from our esteemed senators. Yes, Senator Frank Drilon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions, and I do not know anyone can answer this. Firstly, under Bayanihan 2, Mr. Chair, we recall that we provided through the DBP and the Land Bank the support for wholesale banking and equity infusion for low interest loans to persons and entities affected by the pandemic. Just for the record, is it correct that we allocated a total of 12.5 billion for DBP for this purpose, and to Land Bank 14,472,500,000? Just to confirm.
DOF, you may respond to the question.
Mr. Chair, if we may have Land Bank and DBP confirmed because they have already received
Yeah, anybody? Yeah, just to confirm that this is what we appropriated.
May we request a response from Land Bank and DBP, who is here with us.
Good morning. This is Nick Chua from DBP. We confirm, Senator, that DBP has received 12.5 billion from Bayanihan 2 for MSMEs. Thank you.
From Land Bank, is it? Yeah, from Land Bank, it's 18.472 billion, 500,000. Is that correct? Just to confirm.
Land Bank, can you respond?
Good morning, Mr. Senator. We also confirm that you have received the same amount.
Yeah, because my next question is, how much have been, appropriated for DBP was 6 billion and a standby fund of 6.5 billion. Has this been made available to you? Were the remittances already from the National Treasury? Are the funds already with you?
Yes, Mr. Senator, we have already downloaded the funds to both Land Bank and DBP.
Okay, thank you. How much of these amounts have been loaned out? Are there already programs being, is the loan program under the Bayanihan 2 has been rolled out? And how many beneficiaries were able to avail of this?
Land Bank and DBP, you may respond.
Morning, Mr. Senator. For DBP, since we only received the funds this February, we are still rolling it out, but we are targeting to disburse all of the funds by year end. That is our target. Majority of which would be probably in the second half of the year as we roll out our programs. Thank you.
Okay, so you intend to fully roll out the program by the end of the year? That's about
That is correct, sir.
12.5 billion. Just for the
That is
record.
correct, sir.
And for Land Bank?
Mr. Senator, for Land Bank naman po, we intend to also roll out the funds in the next 2-year period. Now, so far, the numbers that I have right now are for MSMEs, which are really one of the most affected businesses in the country. So for MSMEs, for example, we have a total number of about 1,000 beneficiaries, potential beneficiaries in the next 2 years. From the funds that were given to us po.
Can I intercede? Secretary Drilon? Senator Drilon?
With the permission of Senator Drilon.
Kasi yung
Go ahead.
answer niya na i-release in 2 years, hindi ba yung Bayanihan 2 this year lang yon? Ang use of Bayanihan 2 is up to the end of the year.
Well, I assume, yes, I assume, Mr. Chairman, that while the Bayanihan 2 is effective only up to, I don't know, September 23 or whatever, the fact that it has been released means that the release is within the period authorized by law, and the implementation of the program would be already left to the agencies, Mr. Chairman. That's how I understand it. In other words, so long as the amounts are released during the effectivity of Bayanihan 2, then it is in compliance with the law, Mr. Chairman. That's how I understand it.
Thank you, thank you, Senator Drilon. I just want to clarify.
I hope I am correct. I am. Anyway, I can always be disputed on that, but that's how I understand it. Anyway, may I know, is there a capital infusion by virtue of Bayanihan 2 to DBP and to Land Bank?
Mr. Senator, of the funds are treated as equity infusion to Land Bank and DBP.
The entire fund?
Yes, sir. As provided under Bayanihan 2 po.
Okay, now, the bill increases the authorized capital stock of DBP. Is that correct? From 35 billion to 100 billion? Can we confirm that again? The bill proposes to increase the authorized capital stock of DBP from 35 to 100 billion. Would you confirm that?
Mr. Senator, yes, we confirm that part of the bill includes the increase in DBP's authorized capital stock from its current 35 billion to 100 billion.
Now, I also note that the bill would authorize the President to approve future increases in DBP's capitalization, and upon recommendation of the DBP's Board of Directors and the concurrence of the Secretary of Finance, infuse actual capital investment as a consequence of this increase in the authorized capital stock. Is that a correct understanding of the law? I will repeat that. First, the law increases the authorized capital stock of DBP from 35 to 100 billion. Then it also authorizes the president to approve future increases in the DBP's capitalization. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator. This is just mirroring the provisions found in the Land Bank Charter, which is not present in the DBP Charter.
Okay. What about the subscription to the authorized capital stock, which will now involve disbursement of public funds? Is that also delegated to the president for decision?
Our understanding, sir, is that this would still be subject to appropriations for any infusions.
Yeah. Yes. Is there? Can you said your understanding? I would like to think that it should be in the law expressly, Mr. Chair, because the infusion of public funds as a consequence of the increase in the authorized capital stock is the disbursement of public funds, which should require congressional approval. Are you confirming that such power is not clear in the proposed bill? In other words, it is silent as to actual capital infusion or authority to actually subscribe to the authorized capital stock?
That is our understanding, sir. Yes, we confirm.
Okay. Would the chair accept the proposition that in the committee report we should propose an amendment in the House version, which should specifically provide that the actual subscription to the increased or to the subscription to the increased authorized capital stock should be with congressional approval, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Drilon, you made a very good point. Not because the increase in capital in the law has been given to the president, it doesn't mean that the subscription will follow suit after. Because the subscription normally will require funds to be infused. And those funds are normally within the powers of Congress through the GAA. So if it's not in the GAA, then definitely no subscription will happen. So I do subscribe to the recommendation of the good minority floor to make that distinction, Mr. President.
Yes. And to make it expressed in the measure that actual subscription will be authorized by Congress in the budget rather than just in the law. Now, why is there no there is no proposed increase in the authorized capital stock of Land Bank? Is because that authority is now existing in the Land Bank Charter? Is that how I understand it?
Yes, yeah, Senator Drilon, yes, Your Honor. We have around 200 billion in of authorized capital stock, so we can still absorb the additional equity infusion, sir.
Sorry, can you? I didn't come in very clear, Mr. Halo.
Yeah, at present, sir, our current authorized capital stock is enough to be able to absorb, sir, the additional capital infusion. We have 200 billion, sir.
Okay. Yes, I just wanted it on the record. Okay.
Yes, sir.
You have stated on the record that you intend on the part of DBP to have a full rollout of this capital infusion for loans before the year is over, and on the case of Land Bank in the next 2 years. Given your record on loan growth on the loan portfolio, is that realistic? Kaya ba talaga yan?
For DBP, sir, despite industry which contracted last year on lending, DBP's loan growth actually increased by 7%, and we're looking to do the same this year, sir. So.
Okay, and you're confident that you can utilize fully the amounts appropriated under this loan program?
Yes, sir. It's part of our commitments as well to the GCG.
I'll yield the floor to other senators, Mr. Chairman, and I can come back later on if there are no more questions.
Thank you, Senator Drilon. Senator Amy?
As I said, the fundamental question will really be the choice of strategically important companies. Do we have any guidelines, perhaps from NEDA or from the banks? Or something that they can suggest that will guide us indeed in providing our scarce resources to the most needy and strategic companies?
NEDA or DOF may respond to that question.
Yes, I think we have a fairly good idea of which are the hardest hit sectors. We've identified in Bayanihan the creatives, tourism areas, transport, and so on. Saan natin itututok itong mga guide loans na to? Perhaps you can give us some shape or form that will be the true guide for laying out these preferential loans, as it were.
The DOF may respond, or the NEDA.
Yeah, Senator Amy, actually we can flash, we have a presentation in terms of the industry performance
Yes.
after the COVID. So maybe in a while we can just ask our DBP colleagues or Land Bank colleagues to make the presentation or flash on the screen the slide. So we have enumerated here the strategic.
Sorry to interrupt. Yes, we have a fairly good idea, having gone through Bayanihan 1, Bayanihan 2, and then the reports that have inundated the Senate, basically asking for rescue packages. Perhaps on one hand, we have to have that list once again reiterated and proven by your data. Secondly, how to help them, encourage them, as it were, to avail of these loans. Kasi so far nga, hindi nangungutang, kasi takot na takot. Paano natin tutulungan yan? At ikatlo, alin ba talaga yung masasabi nating strategic? So siguro, we have this list, and then we have to make it easier for all these MSMEs to come forward and avail. Kasi we had the hearing even of the small bank corporation, yung SBC ng DTI. Wala na ng requirements ng documentation yun Wala pa rin nangungutang. Yun talaga nagiging problema. Obviously, in this economic atmosphere, kung wala kang kinikita, ba't ka naman na uutang? So please proceed po.
Okay, so I think we can flash yung pong performance ng different industries before and after the pandemic. So dun po sa mga services, so nakita po for the wholesale and retail, before the pandemic, noong 2019 po, they posted sa real GDP growth of 8.1. So, so here we present po the different performance of the badly hit industries. We have enumerated their performance before and after the pandemic. Hindi lang po in terms of their contribution sa GDP, but more so in terms of the change in employment. So yung mga jobs that were lost in these various industries are also seen po dito sa slide na to. So yung po sa manufacturing, about 618,000 po. And then sa construction, about 205,000. Transportation po, mga 600, more than 600,000. Accommodation, another 600,000. And of course, dun po sa wholesale, medyo mas maliit lang po ang hit po in terms of the job losses. But all told, for the total Philippines, mga 2.7 million jobs that were lost for these various industries.
Yes, siguro we can match it also with the MSMEs presently that have been borrowing since the pandemic of March 2019. Ay, sorry, 2020 po. Sino ba nangutang? At least yun gumagalaw. Yung iba hindi pa rin nangungutang eh. Is there some kind of breakdown that will indicate which industries are still open to borrowing despite the very adverse conditions?
Given po yung performance ng DBP, and they've said na there's an increase in loan growth of about 7% even with the pandemic last year, then ma-identify po ng DBP which are those companies na continues to borrow from the bank together with Public Land Bank. Because I'm sure po, given that in 2 years' time, they see that there would already be a full availment of the resources provided under Bayanihan 2, meron na pong pipeline of companies that would be availing these loans of GFIs.
Yes, I see. Siguro, for example, alam ko yung hotel, yung the second one that you had, the transport, hotel accommodations, talagang hindi nanghihiram eh. Wala pa yatang 10% eh. Yung inuna ninyo yung manufacturing, meron ba nangutang sa sektor na yan? Maybe we can ask DBP, do you know, are there companies that have been borrowing from the manufacturing sector since this opened, since Bayanihan started, the DBP?
Good morning, Madam Senator. We don't have the data right now, but we will get back to you on that one. We'll just source it from our lending unit.
Okay.
The problem kasi is that we're aware of these sectors that have been badly hit. We're all too aware. As a matter of fact, they keep coming to the Senate. We have friends in these sectors. In the case of our chairman, Win, he has family in these sectors. We're all well aware which ones these are. But how to encourage them to even avail of these emergency loans is the question, because they're not coming forward at all. How do we generate some kind of confidence? Obviously, the vaccination rollout is the answer, no? But in addition, is there anything more that the banks can do or we can do here in the legislature?
Madam Senator?
Yes, po.
For the things that we are doing po in the bank, in Land Bank of the Philippines, we are actually packaging the loans po for these affected companies in a manner that would take into account po the current state that they have. So we do provide certain accommodations to them in terms of grace periods on
Grabe ang
interest,
construction,
grace period on principal po, to make sure po that
accommodation,
during this
service,
time when they are currently struggling financially, they wouldn't have additional problem in paying off its debt po. So that's one of the things that we are doing to encourage them po to borrow, by giving them accommodations in terms of grace periods of in interest and principal po.
It's really frightening kasi pag nakita mo yung accommodation, yung mga hotel and food service, nasa 44.7%, yung construction nakakahimatay rin sa 26%. Bakit ayaw pa rin mangutang? Ibig sabihin na walang kumpiyansa, sigurado, no? Isa pa, baka masyadong mahirap pa rin ang ating documentary requirements, hindi ba natin pwedeng luwagan pa? Ika nga, paano kaya? Dahil hindi pa rin nagpapasaklolo eh. Tapos, yun nga, and it matches the labor participation rates, the unemployment. They're not even bothering to come forward. Parang nag-give up eh. Parang nakakadismaya yung ating figures. I know the small business corporation, they tried to come out with mobile units, liaise with the local governments and the co-ops. They've also tried for loan applications online. Are these things going to be helpful? Have we initiated any of these efforts po?
Madam Senator, for DBP, what we've seen, at least in the past year, together with the support from Bayanihan 1 and Bayanihan 2, is really their MSMEs have asked for assistance in terms of lengthening their loans,
Yes.
waivers of or deferment of interest payments and principal payments. And these are actually under DBP's response program. We do have a program specific for that. Doon po talaga tayo tumutulong sa ating MSMEs at least at the onset of the pandemic until end of the year of last year, no? Because
Yes.
most of them are just trying to survive, tread water po. So they're just not paying first interest and principal payments. Wala po sila masyadong inuutang na bago because there's no need for additional inventory, for example, or additional expansions. But we suppose that now that the economy is opening up, we would expect that there might be additional loans, probably this year, for the new inventory coming in, for the new business that they might be pursuing, particularly as they transition, let's say, from the brick and mortar selling po to, let's say, online selling. So
Yes.
maybe this is why there is some delay in terms of loan applications, because even on their end, they might be also looking at how to adjust their business models. But insofar as DBP po is concerned, we do have that kind of support, but mainly what we've seen in the past year is requests for moratoriums on interest and principal payments on their existing loans po.
Yes, thank you very much, DBP. That seems to be what we're seeing. These are all deferments on payments, the extension and restructuring of loan periods, but these all refer to old loans. So bigay tayo ng bigay ng pera sa Bayanihan 1 at Bayanihan 2, bigay tayo ng bigay sa Land Bank, sa LBP, sa PhilGuarantee. Pero nakikita natin na wala naman nangungutang, sayang lang yung binibigay na additional na kapital. So I'm wondering whether we can add something so that they will be encouraged to borrow. Perhaps, like you said earlier, maybe we need to package this with the technical assistance from the ICT or DOST for online platforms. More training, perhaps, I don't know, from DTI or from which group, to reevaluate their inventory and supply, their chains for inventory and supply. Kasi dati, di ba, yung as you need it lang yung supply para walang masyadong bodega, limbawa, ngayon iba na, gusto na natin mag-stock ng maramihan at mahirap na. All these kind of technical support will probably have to be packaged with this, otherwise this won't work either. This is my fear, that as much as we'd like to pass the guide bill, naglagay na tayo ng napakaraming pera sa Bayanihan 1, Bayanihan 2. Hindi talaga gumagalaw eh. Baka sayang lang eh. So that's actually my fear, even as I authored this very early on. What can we do that this money will really circulate and revive the economy? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maraming palaisipan.
Thank you, Senator Amy. You want DBP and Land Bank to answer that? Those are very valid points, and in fact, Senator Frank raised that earlier. No, so DBP and Land Bank, you may respond to that statement.
Senator, thank you for that statement, Madam Senator. And definitely, actually, one of the key points of GUIDE is really to assist the banks to make it cheaper for our borrowers to borrow. And more than the infusion that is provided in the GUIDE bill, it's really the tax exemptions and exemptions and fee privileges, particularly for MSME lending, that would redound to our borrowers. So this does not necessarily increase our lending portfolio, but it will through the infusion of additional capital to both banks. But it is the exemptions on the taxes and fee privileges related to borrowing that would hopefully make it cheaper for our constituents, for the MSMEs to approach the two banks to borrow. And these are the documentary stamp taxes and the GRT, which are usually shouldered by our borrowers. So with this, we hope that this will further entice them to approach the two banks for borrowing.
Madam
Yes, with
Senator,
all due
for Land
respect,
Bank.
Mr. Chair, I think what I'm saying is what we've held in the Committee on Economic Affairs as truth from the very beginning, which is all these monetary efforts that have been requested by the Department of Finance should have an even bigger fiscal correspondent amount. We really have to put money in the pockets of people until this happens. All these infusions into the banks don't seem to be moving. Yun ang kinatatakutan natin from the very beginning. And I believe that's the reason why there is so much noise from the lower house, from Congress, for a third Bayanihan 3. Pero tignan natin kasi pati yung mga bayanihan nauubos sa bank infusions rather than direct cash payments to the consumers. Yun lang po. Yun lang ang observation ko. Puro bangko ang tutok natin eh. Kung maaari, sana diretsong cash aid na sa consumers. Put money in their pockets. Perhaps do these dated vouchers na kailangan gastusin for food within the 3-month period given, and so on and so forth. This has been done in the past and there are very many successful experiments. Wala, rant ko na lang to na hindi na bankero ang may kasalanan po. Tayo na.
Thank you, Senator Amy. Senator Cynthia?
As Senator Drilon talked of the budget and Senator Amy talked about the loans, that will be granted. I want to ask about naman this creation of holding company. I want you to clarify to me what is this holding company, how much will be capitalized in this holding company, and it's supposed to invest in equity where they will invest the equity, and how do you control the risk of this holding company? Will you please explain to me? Yes.
Yeah, DOF?
Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, para po makarespond adequately sa katanungan po ni Senator Cynthia Villar, we can already show you our presentation, which will really focus more on the creation of the special holding company. So
Yes.
we'll already yung po mga
Yes, you may proceed.
Elise, please go ahead.
So good morning once again. So the special holding company business model was conceptualized following the successful models in other countries, including Germany's German Economic Stabilization Fund and the United States Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP, where the governments provided support to nationally important companies in order to save jobs, not just from the firm itself, but from its expanded network of suppliers, dealers, and users. This is the same intention with the creation of the Special Holding Company under the Guide Bill. The Special Holding Company is meant to assist rehabilitating strategically important companies or SICs experiencing temporary solvency issues due to the pandemic. This also means that these firms should have shown sound financial performance prior to the pandemic and should be able to provide a sound plan of action on what they will do to recover and provide an exit plan for the special holding company. Strategically important companies are those deemed to be nationally significant with high economic returns or high employment potential and should be able to demonstrate upstream and downstream linkages to other firms and industries. This is important as support to SICs should also redound to other enterprises that do business with them, such as their suppliers and buyers of their products, which are typically MSMEs as well. Now, on the investment guidelines and limitations of the special holding company, to protect the interest of government, it is intended that the special holding company will limit its exposure to a particular company or industry to avoid undue risk. In addition, it should be emphasized that it is not contemplated that the special holding company be the largest shareholder or creditor of an SIC and will not take over or dictate the operations of the firm. However, support from the special holding company will include provisions that are meant to protect the government and ensure the objectives of GUIDE are met, such as it should not be party to any pending tax-related case for tax collection or tax evasion. It should not be a debtor in any bankruptcy proceedings prior to the ECQ period, and should not be insolvent, but capable of being rehabilitated as determined by the special holding company. In addition, a strategically important company with an investment from the special holding company should not reduce their employee count beyond a prescribed percentage, understanding that some redundancies may be necessary as part of the rehabilitation plan, but with preference for former employees should there be a need. Not to issue stock dividends, not to issue cash dividends, not to increase salaries and benefits of senior executives and board members, not to provide retirement or separation pay to senior executive and board members, not to incur irregular, unnecessary, extravagant expenditures such as entertainment, events, renovations, and the like, and not to dilute the ownership of the special holding company in the SIC. And finally, as mentioned, the SIC's recovery plan should include a clear time-bound exit for the special holding company. Additional requirements and conditionalities which we intend to provide in the IRR include that the special holding company evaluation will be guided by the following principles. The recovery plan provided is sound and considers the pace of recovery. The SIC is able to demonstrate its ability to promote and induce employment opportunities through itself or through its linkages. The SIC is able to clearly demonstrate forward and backward linkages in the economy and how they contribute to these industries and enterprises. The SIC's overall economic importance shall be based on how they would affect the industry and the economy should they fail. So these are some of the criteria that we would be looking at. And just to emphasize, the benefits of having this special holding company is that by assisting the SICs, the government is saving jobs as SICs contribute about 37% of Philippine employment or around 3.3 million jobs. Government is also helping the economy as the SICs contribute about 64% of total value added. In addition, the additional investment by the special holding company in the investing companies will allow them to tap additional financing needed to support their operating and capital requirements. The special holding company also complements the recently signed FIST Act by supporting SICs where banks and other financial institutions in the country may be heavily exposed. Assisting SIC stay afloat also reduces risk of default and thereby promotes market stability and resilience. And lastly, the special holding company can also provide a signal or a seal of good housekeeping to the capital markets on the creditworthiness of an SIC, thus increasing their options for financial assistance and possible exit later on for the special holding company. So in summary, we believe that the guide bill is a critical component of the government's broad-based recovery plan and works in synergy with Bayanihan 2, Phase 8, and the 2021 budget. It is worth noting that the guide bill is one of the 14 top priority bills in the harmonized NEDA Common Legislative Agenda. It incorporates best practices and lessons learned and provides for a robust governance structure to ensure prudent and responsible use of GFI capital. And lastly, the guide bill also provides adequate safeguards on moral hazard, concentration risk, and abuse by beneficiaries, and recovery of investment. So, dear senators, this ends our presentation on the SHC and relevant features of the guide bill. Thank you.
Yes, and Senator Villar.
You presented a very generalized plan of what is this creation of a holding company and them investing in equity on SICs. I just want to know something actual. Yung ano ba ang target nyo na i-raise dito sa investment na holding company na to? Magkano ba ilalagay nyo dito? Ilang company ang tina-target nyo? Ano ang actual effect nito sa employment at saka sa whatever you say the employment at saka GDP? Parang you give me a more detailed or just not just a series of guidelines, but gusto ko malaman kung ilan ang i-invest nyo dito and then ilang company ang tina-target nyo para malaman namin what amount of money are we talking about to be invested in this holding company. And ilan ang ita-target na companies and then ano ba ang returns natin in terms of more jobs and maybe increase in GDP, something like that. Yung more actual. Kasi madaling sabihin yung mga guidelines, ganon, but in practice, can we really do it? I mean, we want to have an idea of how it will be done in actuality. Okay, can you give me a rough idea?
Madam Senator, this is Kian po from Land Bank.
Yes.
So on your question po, Madam Senator, as to the companies that
please tell me how much are you intending to invest in this holding company first? And then with that money, how many companies are you targeting? Okay.
Okay.
And how these companies will help the economy in terms of employment and increase in GDP?
Okay po, ma'am. So for Land Bank of the Philippines po, ma'am, the money that we will be receiving from Guide po is 7.5 billion. Now, out of that 7.5 billion po, currently based on the information that we have, the 500 million pesos of which will be used as seed capital for MSME loans. So you might probably think po that the 500 million is a small amount, but
500 million. It's 500 million for MSMEs.
So far, that is the current numbers that we have.
And 7 billion for this holding company. Is that how you will do it?
Just to clarify lang po, Madam Senator, on the 500 million, the 500 million po would serve as the capital. But as mentioned earlier po, there are multiplier effects to the seed capital that we are getting. So the multiplier effect po is 8.5 to 11 times. So that 500 million po will be multiplied pa by 8.5 to 11 times. And that's how much loans we are able to extend po to MSMEs.
So because if you have a 5 million additional equity, then you can raise deposits which you can lend to MSMEs. Kaya may 8.5 di ba? Oh,
Yes,
yun yung sa MSMEs. But how about this holding company? How much are you going to invest in this holding company?
So, given our budget po, ma'am, of about 500 seed capital for MSME loans, the 7 billion, ma'am, can be technically deployed to the SHC for investment in the SICs. So
Okay.
currently, ma'am, there are no applicants pa naman po doon sa SICs, but from our portfolio of loan clients, ma'am, we have already identified more or less 15 companies that might qualify for SIC for
Can you
investment
give me
by
an
the
idea of those companies? Is that
Um,
just an idea of those companies?
Yes po, ma'am. So as far as those companies are concerned po, ma'am, I cannot give you po the specific names of the
Yeah,
companies.
but just give me an
But
idea, the kind of business.
yes po, ma'am. So in terms of industries po, they are actually engaged po in the tourism industry. They're also
Oh,
engaged
that's
in
hotel. Hotel.
construction. Yes po, ma'am. Retail trade. There are also companies under retail trade po.
And wala sa transport.
Transportation, yes po, ma'am. Transportation also po.
So maybe hotel, transportation. Di ba mga high risk to ngayon? How much do you, so there are 15 companies. If you have 7 billion divided by 15, something like that.
That would be something that would be discussed pa po, ma'am,
Yeah,
because
but just an idea.
well, it could be in that particular approach po.
So something
that
like 500 million each or something, di ba?
Yes po, ma'am. Except that there are multiple factors po kasi to consider po, ma'am. So
Yeah. I just
Yes
want to have an idea of what we're going to do, di ba? And
Yes po,
that's a direct investment. And there is an exit. You said that there is an exit mechanism. So how do you exit?
well, for the exit mechanism po, ma'am, di ba, the investment in the SIC po, ma'am, would be time bound po. So
Yeah. What is the time that you have an idea of the time that you're looking at? Especially if you make a program, you have more or less an idea.
Yes po, ma'am. So for the
What
time
is the
frame po,
time
ma'am,
bound? Ilan taon?
we are contemplating po, ma'am, or we are forecasting that in the next 3 years, companies might already might have already recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic.
So
or at
3
least,
years ang exit. You will exit after 3 years.
that would be the forecast, ma'am. But the guiding principle po is that we would exit once the company has already can already stand by itself, meaning that
So
it
that's
can,
the minimum. That's the minimum.
yes po, ma'am. That's the minimum based on our studies po.
Okay. How about DBP? How do you intend to do it? So you
Good
will
morning once again,
create
ma'am.
different holding company. The DBP will create a different holding company and the Land Bank will create a different holding company. Is that it?
No, ma'am. There will be a single holding company. It will be a joint venture between DBP and Land Bank, for which Land Bank will be infusing at their 7.5. DBP would be at 2.5. That's the maximum that we can infuse under this guide bill. If
10B.
we were to infuse, yes, ma'am.
So DBP is 10B.
2.5, ma'am, and Land Bank
Hindi,
is at 7.
parang 10B total. O DBP
Yes,
is 2.5. Okay. So that's the
correct,
limit that you're going to risk. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have
and then
do you have a description of what you're going to do, yung DBP? Can you describe it to me? Because Land Bank was able to describe to me what they're going to do. What are you going to do, DBP? Do you have an idea?
So with a special holding company, we are looking at our existing client base that are currently asking for support.
So how many ang target mo?
At the moment with 10 billion, ma'am, we're looking maybe at about 5 to 10. So an investment size of
No,
about 1 to 2 billion.
the land bank said they're looking at 15 for their clients. How about you, DBP? How many clients are you looking at?
We look, as mentioned, 5 to 10 clients, ma'am, on our end.
Okay,
So
for
because
two
we're
and a
looking
half.
at, yeah, we're looking at about a total investment size of about 1 to 2 billion pesos per client. So
How
it
can
really
you do
depends
that?
because
You only have
we are
10
limited with
billion.
10.
How can you do
That's why,
that?
ma'am.
Are you going to raise deposit to be invested in that, or you just rely on your 10
No, ma'am.
billion?
We will be relying on the 10 billion, but the SHC will be, we will be allowing in the SHC private investments. So part of the discussions is to get support, for example, from our multilateral friends like ADB or World Bank to
Okay.
also put in capital into SHC.
So
Provided that the
what do you
DBP and land-
expect from your multilateral friends in terms of investment to your holding company? What do you expect? DBP and Land Bank will invest 10 billion. How about the multilaterals? What are you expecting from them?
Below 10B, ma'am, because the requirement at the moment is DBP and Land Bank should still own majority or 51%.
So what is your
Maybe about 9.
expectation? Minimum
At
of
the best case, ma'am, about 9 billion. Best case.
okay. 9. Okay. At least we have an idea of what you're going to do so that when we discuss the bill, we know what will happen with regards to this holding company. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Senator Drilon is recognized.
Thank you. I would like to continue exploring the questions and issues raised by Senator Villar, Mr. Chairman, with your permission. The authorized capital stock of the special holding company will be 10 billion, if I recall correctly. Is that correct? The equity infusion is 10 billion. 2.5 billion from DBP and the land bank 7.5 billion. Just to reconfirm again.
That's correct, sir.
Yes.
That's the maximum we would be infusing. Yes, sir.
And where will the funding be sourced?
It is part, sir, of the guide bill. This is the additional capital that would be infused to DBP and Land Bank.
So public funds. I mean, from
That's
the
correct.
public funds. All right. Now, if there is a need to infuse more capital beyond the 10 billion, where will that be sourced? Or is that the maximum that can be invested?
Under the guide, yeah.
Sorry?
Under the guide bill, sir, it would be the 10 billion. But DBP and Land Bank, as universal banks, we do have the capacity to invest further in the SHC, but this would now be coming from our own funds, from the DBP own funds. But this would be subject, of course, to the requirements now of the BSP, for example, on related parties, etc. So, but at the moment, what we are looking at is just the 10 billion as provided in the bill.
But if there is need, you know, as Senator Villar implied, this may not be much given the magnitudes of the needs. 10 billion is that substantial taken in the context of our needs. So it is entirely possible that you need additional capitalization for this contemplated special holding company. And if that is so, then under the law, you will be you will source this from the existing funds of DBP and Land Bank. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir, as part of our investable funds.
Right. Now, this is not a tamasek kind of fund, di ba? In fact, you are investing in a special holding company as a rescue package that can be availed of by the companies who need assistance. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct, sir.
Yeah, you don't invest in blue chips companies, but in companies which would need assistance. Is that correct?
Yes.
So realistically, hindi po kikita itong mga kumpanyang ito because the purpose is that the assessment is the need to let them survive rather than anything else. So there is the reality is you can be faced with a situation where these are not profitable investments.
That is a risk, sir. That is correct. But part of the requirement is that
Yes. Now, isn't it better, Mr. Chairman, that we specify the amount that can be invested rather than leave it to the full discretion of the boards of the different GFIs? Because theoretically, they can, they can invest so much, and given the risk involved, magdidebate tayo kung tama ba yan o hindi. Is there merit, Mr. Chairman, to set the amount to specify the amount which can be invested, as this is people's money, these are public funds.
Correct. That can be studied, Senator Drilon, especially the infusion of the 10 billion will come from the GAA. So therefore, those are public funds that will be infused.
And I'm talking, Mr. Chair, of the additional equity requirement. In addition to the 10 billion, this will be drawn from the existing funds of the DBP and the Land Bank. But these are public funds because the DBP and Land Bank are wholly owned government corporations. So these are public funds. And therefore, what I'm suggesting is we should study the limitation that the law will now specify the amount that can be invested by Land Bank and DBP respectively from their own funds to put into the
holding company
for the holding companies, because as we said, this is not a Temasek kind that invest in blue chips, but we are investing in order to help these companies survive. So I'm talking about this because of our experience. For example, I hate to cite it, but you cannot help but cite UCPB. UCPB is, we invested funds or government invested funds because of public interest, public policy, but UCPB is just trying to survive, and it's not as profitable as the other financial institutions. So it is in that sense that I am suggesting to the committee, in close consultation with the DBP and the PNB and the DBP and the Land Bank and the DOF, as to that we impose a limit that can be invested. In other words, the authority must come from below, because while these are funds from DBP and Land Bank, these are public funds.
I second the motion, Senator Drilon.
Thank you very much.
Chair?
Yes,
Support.
we recognize the DOF. Yes.
Yes, yeah, Mr. Chair, also just to interject, any additional equity that will be put by Land Bank or DBP into the special holding company would be charged against their capital. So it would also reduce yung capital asset ratio nila, which are also, there are prescribed limits by the BSP. So in a way, they would also have to get approval from the monetary board and the BSP whenever they would have to infuse additional equity to SHC.
But we're coming from a position where we know that chances of recovering the amounts that will be invested is less than 50. I mean, because these are not blue chips, and we invest to assist, and therefore, anyway, that's a suggestion. We do not have to decide that now, but the committee, by suggestion, is for the committee to decide on that and make it part of the report. And I am glad that Senator Cynthia Villar and Senator Marcos have seconded that proposed provision in the committee report. We are just suggesting that that should be studied instead of just accepting the proposition that any additional investment, whether will only be decided by the board of directors. Yes, they will still decide, but let us have a limit on the exercise of such discretion, because I would repeat, this is not an investment where the consideration is profit, but the consideration is to save these companies, and therefore these are not blue chips companies that we're talking about. In any case, I'll get to some detail, Mr. Chairman. We noticed that the presentation said there will be requirements and there will be conditionalities. For example, insofar as requirements are concerned, I noticed that one of the requirements is that there must be no pending tax case. Is that correct? Tama ba yun?
That's correct, sir.
Yes. These requirements will be in a rule and a regulation, not in the law.
DOF?
Mr. Chair, if I may also draw the attention of the honorable senators to Section 21. We are also creating an oversight committee with members from the House and the Senate, and it will be looking into the performance of the SHC as well as the because of the equity infusion of public funds by both DBP and Land.
Yes, thank you for that, Madam. Yes, that would help us in monitoring the performance. But in other words, my question is, Mr. Chairman, will the requirements that was presented be in the law or in the rules and regulations? Like, for example, there must be no pending tax case.
As we have proposed, it's already in the law, Mr. Senator.
It's already in the law. Yeah, that's why. Is it in the law, ma'am? Is it in the draft law?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
All right, that answers my question. Now, my next question is, suppose these conditionalities that are enumerated, which you say will find itself in the law, if it is violated, what happens? Will the investment be withdrawn? There are conditionalities that was presented. So my first question was, is this part of the law? You said yes. Number two, assuming that the condition along the line is violated, what happens? Will the exit mechanism will the exit mechanism be triggered?
Any one from DOF, DBP, or Land Bank may answer the question. DOF?
First of all, Mr. Chair, there is part of the requirements for the special holding company to invest in the company is that they should present a very credible and time-bound recovery plan, which would be monitorable. So there would be milestones, and that would be strictly monitored by the SHC. So if they're faltering in these commitments, then there would be also remedies that will be placed in the agreement between the SHC and the company in terms of how the SHC would legally also exit from their investment in the company.
That will be in the joint venture agreement, these remedies.
Yes, because the investment of Land Bank and DBP, Mr. Senator, would be in the special holding company.
But for example, if I recall the presentation correctly, one of the conditionalities is that there must be no bonuses, no increases in salary of certain executives. Is that a correct recollection? I was just listening. Is that a correct recollection of this conditional, among the conditions?
That's right, Mr. Senator.
Huh?
Tama po.
Okay. Now, these are determined by the board of directors, and I assume the investee, which is the investee, which is the SHC, would not have the majority in the board. And the board can decide on matters which pertain to them, as in compensation. And compensation is one of the conditionality set. If this is in a joint venture agreement, if this agreement between the stockholders are not followed by the board of directors, what will happen? Will their exit mechanism be triggered?
Senator, maybe for DBP, maybe you can to respond. So the intention is that this would be a breach of the shareholders agreement that would be signed between the special holding company and the investee company, and thus would be subject to civil action by the special holding company for breaches in the agreement. And so we would be claiming against the other shareholders, particularly the majority shareholders at that time, for that. And another possible action would be, again, as you mentioned, the trigger of the exit mechanism from the SHC. So this would be all included in the shareholders agreement to be signed between the SHC and the investee company.
We do appreciate that, but maybe we should insert, Mr. Chairman, some provision in the law which will respond to these kinds of conditions, because this is the reality on the ground. A shareholders agreement cannot be binding on the board of directors, who can decide on certain issues which can affect the conditionalities imposed in the loan agreement. And therefore, it is a valid question what happens afterwards to the investment if these conditionalities are violated by the board. Of course, you can go to court, etc. But as a lawyer, I can tell you, advise you with very simply 2 words: good luck if you go to court. So my suggestion, Mr. Chair, as we will be going through this, is to have a clearer set of rules insofar as violation of these conditions, of these conditionalities, of the requirements that was earlier enumerated. We do not know whether this will be in the bill or in the law or in the rules and regulations, but nevertheless, we should address that concern, Mr. Chairman. Now, why are we choosing equity investment versus a loan portfolio?
Mr. Senator, Gian from
Yes.
Land Bank.
Just for the record.
So, okay po. So, equity infusion po is important if, for example, the company can no longer secure funding through the normal debt capital markets. And that would happen po if, for example, have would have experienced a period of declining earnings that would have already eaten up on their capital. So for these companies, even if they want to seek funding through loans, they might not be able to do so because banks are looking at a specific debt to equity ratio. If their debt to equity ratio has been compromised because of a period of declining earnings, then they won't be able to secure loans po from banks. And that's the reason why there is a need to infuse equity into these companies in order to improve their debt equity ratios. And in fact, po, with the improvement in their debt to equity ratios, they could actually go to the market na po, to banks, and perhaps loan more money from them po.
Very, yes, from a financial point of view, very, very valid. But you will appreciate that since it is an equity, the government would not enjoy any preference in case of insolvency versus a loan. That is the aspect that you have. So yes, we infuse equity because of the reasons that you have stated. On the other hand, on the other side of the scale is that if the company goes bankrupt, an equity would enjoy zero priority versus a loan that would, under the civil code, will enjoy preference over other debts. Has that issue been addressed?
Mr. Senator, that would definitely be the risk that the SHC and Land Bank and DBP will be taking. But there are also ways to somehow mitigate that particular problem. For example, the SHC po would be able to execute convertible loans, meaning they start with loans and then later on, if, for example, there would be an improvement in the financial performance of the company, then these loans can be converted po to equity. So that would be one of the first that can be done. But as far as straight equity infusion is concerned, that would be correct po that once there would be an event of bankruptcy, equity would have the last priority in terms of the distribution of funds. But that would be mitigated by a good analysis on the recovery plan of the SICs concerned po.
I guess all I am asking for is, should we provide in the law, I am not espousing this, but I am pointing out a circumstance or a decision point, whether it's a loan or an equity, both have advantages and disadvantages. And again, that is addressed to the committee when it makes a recommendation to the plenary whether to take the route of purely equity investment or a loan portfolio to be used for these strategically important entities. I am just asking the committee in close consultation with the DOF to take a look at that. In other words, that option should be made available. Would you agree with that, Mr. Chair? Can you consider that, take that into consideration?
Yes, Senator Drilon, the DOF is here, and risk is definitely one of the most contentious items. We don't want a scenario wherein we will be left holding the bag, so to speak, at the end of the day. So we will seriously consider that and analyze the situation and include necessary safeguards.
Yeah, and particularly I am interested in what remedies would the government have in case the conditionalities would be violated, which conditionalities have been specified. I do not know if it's in the law or in the implementing regulation, but that was one of the items that was discussed earlier by the Land Bank.
I just want to clarify your
Yes, yes.
can I ask question? Okay.
No problem. Yes.
I just want to clarify how much will be invested in guide and how much will go to MSMEs and how much will go to this holding company. The total investment in guide, 10 billion ba lang?
That would be perfect po.
Ano?
That would be po. That will
Hindi
be
ka madin. You
available
unmute, you
po.
unmute. I cannot hear you.
That's correct, Madam Senator.
It's
10 billion.
10 billion. And then how much will go to the holding company? It's like how much? 9 billion?
10 billion, ma'am.
Excuse me, Senator, Madam Senator. The way I understand it, there are two programs: the lending and the equity.
Yeah, I just want to know how much are the money involved for
So
both.
yes, from the notes, from the testimony, and from the bill, it would appear that the equity is a total of 10 billion.
Now the loans to MSMEs.
That maybe we should get from them. How much would the loan program be? But yes, that's a question. How much will the loan program be?
For the MSME, sir, we are not constrained to the 2.5, at least for DBP, we're not constrained to the 2.5 infused under guide bill because we can still use our internal funds for
Yeah,
this
but
one.
how much is the guide bill? The total guide bill is how much? 10 plus
billion.
2.5, ganan?
No, sir. 10 billion lang po.
And then
Just
how
10
much
billion.
will go to the loans of the MSMEs?
There's no specific amount, ma'am, because
No, but
those
the
are
guide
MSMEs.
bill, I think the guide bill will give to that. How much? Parang tig for 500 ba kayo ng Land Bank at DBP? Ganun ba? Parang ganun ang dinig ko.
Yung 10 billion po, ma'am, meron po kasi siyang tinatawag na multiplier effect on our ability to lend.
Yeah, I know that.
Yun
I
po
know
yung
that.
mangyayari.
Just tell me, don't talk about the multiplier effect. Just tell me how much will go to MSMEs yung loan and then how much will go to the holding company.
Yes.
10 billion, ma'am, sa holding company out of the 10 billion that is infused in guide.
So wala do sa MSMEs. So it's all it's
Kasi
all
po,
to the holding company.
Yung funds po for the MSMEs is internal funds na po ng banks, which we have
So the
sufficient
guide is
amount.
all about investing to a holding company to invest in equity, di ba?
But
That's how-
maybe to clarify, while it is not yet invested in the holding company, these funds can still be used for additional loans for the MSME.
No, but the guide created the holding company.
Yes, yes.
So this guide bill is about investing 10 billion to the holding company to be invested in equity of SICs. Yung sinasabi niyong MSM is parang pampaganda lang yon. Pero it will come from your money and you will do it without the guide.
Madam Chair,
I
Mr.
don't
Chair?
think the guide will be acceptable to the legislators if there is no MSMEs. But actually, the guide bill is about creating a holding company to be invested, to invest in the equity of SICs. Yun ang guide.
Yes.
Yes. And that's how
yes,
I understand it. I don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair?
I agree with Senator Villar, except that at the start of this committee hearing, I asked them, Senator Villar, Mr. Chairman, how much is the appropriation under Bayanihan 2 for the DBP and the Land Bank? The answer was the total amount of 12.5 billion was appropriated for DBP and 18.472.5 was for Land Bank. So that's why we ask. So is this a capital infusion or a specifically for a loan program for MSMEs?
Before, yeah, we recognize DOF Treasurer De Leon and then Senator Aimee, and then to DBP again to answer the question of Senator Drilon.
Mr. Chairman, ang nangyari po, remember po, when we were discussing before yung Bayanihan 2, kasama po talaga dapat yung sa equity infusion for the special holding company because that is also an initiative part of being able to support yung mga distressed enterprises. But when the Bayanihan 2 nga po was enacted, ang na-enact lang po would really be for the equity infusion for the MSMEs ng DBP at ng Land Bank. So, yung dalawang components ng guide, naiwan po yung for the special holding company.
Kasi nga, Iha, yung mga legislator, hindi sila mahilig na mag-equity infusion ka sa malalaking kumpanya. Hindi sila mahilig ng ganon. So this guide is about that. I-clarify na natin, call a spade para hindi tayo nalilito, di ba? Guide is for the SICs, yung mga malalaking kumpanya in trouble. Para nadidetermine natin kasi tinatanong ko sila kung ano pupunta sa MSMEs, parang yung ano din yung dati. Oo, walang addition. So this guy, yung 10 billion will just go to the holding company to be invested in high risk companies na nagkakaproblema. Wala namang masama ng ganon. Kaya lang, sabi nga ni Senator Drilon, ilimit natin kasi these are high risk. Pag dinala mo dito, high risk yan. May possibility na mawala na yung pera natin. So let us limit our exposure to high risk. Diba? Yun lang naman. A typical banker will do that. Diba? Tayo, gobyerno, mag-allocate tayo for these companies na nababankrupt para naman makaahon ng ekonomiya natin. But we should limit it because those are all high risk companies kasi pwede rin silang makarecover, pwedeng hindi. Pero pag nilagay natin pera natin dyan, we accept the fact na pwedeng mawala na yung pera na yan. That's it. Call a spade a spade. Wag na tayong maglokohan dito kasi marunong din naman kami. Oo, alam naman namin yan. Oo. Magsabihan na tayo ng totoo para we can live peacefully with each other. Diba? We know the risk and we just control the risk, di ba? Oh, yun lang.
Will give the comment of I will give the comment of Senator Villar a lot of weight. Her business acumen is world renowned. And
ano naman yan accepted naman yan. We want to help them. But call a spade a spade. This is risky. So we limit it para hindi naman tayo mawala ng maraming pera. Diba?
With the indulgence of Senator Villar, we'll call on Senator Aimee and then the DBP rep.
I'm finished. I just want to clarify.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Senator Villar, Senator Drilon, I share your hesitation about this outright lending and the endowment of the large sum of 10 billion to a special holding company. If you note, my version of the bill did away with that completely. Wala pong holding company sa akin. to provide equity infusion to said strategically important companies. Instead, ang sinabi ko, i-include na lang sa loan program, regular loan program of DBP and LBP, so that the government doesn't acquire shares or ownership, hindi siya ma-jeopardize. Instead, gagawa na lang ng trust fund. Yun ang recommendation namin, na dun sa funding of LBP and DBP, i-trust fund na lang to exempt them from the very, very stringent prudential loan standards, at yung mga basic loan standards na lang ang i-apply. So walang holding company po sa akin, kasi hindi nga ako sang-ayon na itong malaking kumpanya, isang dambuhalang creation na naman natin yan. Wag tayo papasok sa ganyan. Maraming salamat po.
DBP, you may respond.
Thank you, Senator. We acknowledge the comments and suggestions made by our honorable senators. But maybe just to clarify, the provisions in the guide bill in relation to MSMEs actually pertain mainly to the tax exemptions po and the exemptions and the fee privileges rather than the actual lending, which is already covered by Bayanihan 2. So this is actually the provisions that were not included in Bayanihan 2 at that time, which we are now including in guide, again, to support the further MSME lending and to lower the cost of our MSME lending to our borrowers. Just to clarify. Thank you.
Yes, maliwanag.
Yes, well, that's precisely what I think Senator Villar expressed it correctly. This bill is all about the formation of a special holding company. And that is where our policy decisions should be made. Number one, the proposal of the Department of Finance is equity versus loans. Thinking of Senator Marcos is that maybe is more inclined towards a loan program. There are advantages and disadvantages of an equity infusion and a loan program. That is for the committee to decide. The second issue from where I sit is beyond the 10 billion, that is infused. Should we place a limit, or should we leave it all to the board of directors? Number three, since these are investments made not because of profit but as a rescue package, there are conditionalities that will be imposed. I am not clear what happens if the conditionalities are not met. Do we have an exit mechanism in order that we can recover the public funds which will be placed in jeopardy because the conditionalities are not met? So these are, to my mind, the issues that we should resolve in the committee. But most important, how much, in other words, but what most important to me is the issue of limiting the exposure in this company by imposing a limit on how much can be invested. That's a very crucial question to this representation, Mr. Chairman. Now, so
Senator Drilon, may I just, with your kind indulgence, clarify your recommendation to the committee? Is it a limit from the GFIs to the special holding companies, or a limit from the special holding company to the strategically important companies, or both? No, because
just the latter. Just the latter.
Just the latter.
The limit on how much can be infused into the holding company by the GFIs. The matter of how much will be infused to the strategically important companies which let's leave that to the holding company to decide. But insofar as the exposure of Land Bank and DBP is concerned, we should specify the amount so that we will not end up with I don't know, 10 times more what we see as 10 billion. Aabot yan, pwede umabot yan ng 100 billion because the discretion is just left to the board of directors of the two financial GFIs. That is an issue that I'm suggesting must be decided and resolved by the committee in its report to the plenary, because that is that's a matter that we should mull over and decide as a matter of policy.
We take note of your recommendation, Senator Frank. In fact, the limit on the amounts the GFIs can infuse to the special holding company is also very important, because we don't want a scenario wherein the GFIs will keep on pumping money into the special holding companies, because their mandate is not the special holding company. Like Land Bank, their mandate is to lend to our farmers. So we don't want the exposure of these banks to increase over time. So we'll take note of your recommendation, Senator Frank.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Senator Frank, are you?
Okay. I also would suggest that the requirements that we were briefed on by the GFI should be included in the law, like the requirement before the infusion of equity can be made that the recipient must not be a party to any pending tax-related cases in court. I do not know whether this will be in the law or in the regulation. My preference is that it should be in the law so that it cannot be changed, because we are investing here public funds.
Senator Drilon, hindi ba palagi natin pinag-uusapan sa Senate na yung minsan yung bill, yung law na ipinasa natin pagdating sa IRR, nababago ang meaning, di ba? Kaya ako, I would always recommend that we indicate it in the law. Kasi yung nasa law na nga, nababago pa, lalo na yung wala sa law.
Yes, that is why, but also in fairness, Mr. Chairman, Madam Senator, I don't want to unduly tie the hands of the executive branch, but there must be reasonable conditions and limits. This comes from our resource persons that the investee company must not be a party to any pending tax-related case. That's why I asked, will this be part of the law or part of the regulation? I would prefer that it be in the law so that it cannot be changed as a policy. And such other conditionalities, minimum conditionalities, that should be stated in the law rather than just in the regulation. Of course, I must admit that it must be reasonable. It must not unduly tie the hands of the GFIs and of the holding company, but there must be minimum standards. That's all we're saying, Mr. Chair, and we do hope that this can be considered. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drilon. And we took note of your recommendations and tasks that were given to the committee to look at. We'll appraise you with our analysis on that. We recognize Senator Villar.
I just want to make a manifestation that this is not against anybody. For example, now we are nearing the end of the term of President Duterte. We will have a new president, and the one managing the economy will be different, I guess. So this is for everybody. Baka ngayon, okay lang yung nagmamanage, but in the next administration, we wouldn't know. So that's why it's better that those important things are in the law. Kasi iba-iba rin yung nagmamanage eh. Pag nag-change ng administration, iba yung nagmamanage. Yung iba okay ngayon, but the next time, we don't know. So, yun ang reason natin. This is not against anybody. It's for the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Villar. Do we have any more questions from our esteemed senators? Senator Amy? No, okay. I have some questions to the DOF, the DBP, and also to Land Bank. And this was already propounded by Senator Amy, because we're talking about, I think you've heard these, our good senators on their comments on the special holding company. And for me, it's not so clear yet what is the universe of strategically important companies we're looking at. These funds will be available using public funds, but what are the industries that you are looking at, and why are you looking at those industries? You presented earlier some broad figures on those industries, but I want to understand how this 10 billion, if indeed this will be put into motion, how this 10 billion can recover those severely impacted industries that you mentioned. So I think Land Bank was the one who presented that earlier. It's not so clear to me how this 10 billion can jumpstart those industries.
Okay po. Mr. Senator, good morning po. So to clarify on the 10 billion po, for sure, if you look at the 10 billion alone, it is a relatively small amount of money for a recovery plan. But we also have to note that this 10 billion po will be given to struggling companies in the form of equity infusion. So given that there has been an improvement in their capital profile because of this equity infusion, these companies now can go to banks to augment their funds that would be sufficient to fund their recovery or rehabilitation plan. So 10 billion is just the initial seed money, but that 10 billion would allow them to borrow more funds from the market. And the entire amount of money that they'll be able to raise would be directed to their recovery plans, to achieving their rehabilitation initiatives po.
Identified some industries in the law, and you also identified certain requirements to be qualified, for example, linkages. How were those identified?
Okay po. So for the strategic industries, these strategic industries were identified because of their national significance. Now, among those strategic industries, during our briefing before, we have identified a priority list, namely manufacturing, construction, transportation, storage, accommodation and food service activities, real estate ownership dwellings, wholesale, retail, trade, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles. We identified those priority lists by looking at how much they have been impacted by COVID-19 in 2020. So the criteria that we used is that if, for example, if in 2020 an industry lost output of at least 150 billion or lost employment of at least 50,000, then they would be qualified to be part of the priority list of strategic industries po.
Make this very simple. No? With the 10 billion, how many jobs can we save?
Okay. So for the 10 billion po of equity infusion, we might probably be saving about generally speaking, we might probably be saving more than a million jobs po in total.
And how many companies are those? How many companies can we save in that 10 billion amount?
Okay po. So in terms of the 10 billion, if we channel that 10 billion po primarily to MSME lending, we might probably be able to cater to more than 58,000 MSMEs. Now, if we channel naman po the 10 billion primarily to strategically important corporations, then depending on how much we'll be able to invest them, looking at the perspective of Land Bank, we might probably be able to help mga more than 15 po if ever we split the entire 10 billion equally po to the strategically important companies that are in need. So that would be the answer to your query po, Senator.
What are those 15 companies or what are those 15 SICs?
I cannot disclose specifically po the names of those companies, but I could give you an insight po of where these companies came from. So out of these 15 companies, about 3 companies are from transportation and logistics po. That's based on our assessment lang in Land Bank. We have 3 companies in energy. We have a company in construction. And we have also identified companies that could be part of the SIC under food and beverage. There are 2 in property. And then there is 1 involved in healthcare po.
Okay, I just want to understand again. No? So you will be investing in equity. Will you be taking a board seat or board seats in those companies to protect your infusion? Because that's not clear in the law. Go ahead, Gian.
Yeah, for the board seats po, we are not. It's not contemplated po that we will be taking board seats doon sa mga strategically important companies, as we want them to do the recovery themselves. But of course, before we invest in these SICs, we will assess their recovery plan to make sure that it's sound, to make sure that it is feasible. So that would be the answer po, Senator.
How do you now protect your investments if you don't have any representation in the board? Like what Senator Drilon mentioned earlier, the board might decide on things that run contrary to those conditionalities. Without representation, then it's very hard to detect the decision of the board.
Yes. On that one po, Senator, there would be monitoring that will be done on these SICs po. So like an investment portfolio, there would be annual, quarterly reports and monitoring that will be done on these SICs to make sure that they are compliant with the conditionality set. So that would be a manner by which the SHC would be able to oversee and to make sure that SICs would comply with the terms of the agreement po.
But my reading of the law is there's no board representation, there's no penalty for a violation of the conditionalities, only repertorial. So I think the investee companies might view this as a very lax in terms of safeguards and also the strictness of the implementation of this investments. So that's one of the things that I saw in the law. Yes, Senator Drilon?
Yes. In relation to that, Mr. Chair, May I know if the special holding company contemplated is a GOCC?
Senator Drilon, yes, it would be a GOCC po initially, while while both Land Bank and DBP would still hold more than 50% share of the SHC po.
So it is a GOCC.
Yes po, Senator Drilon.
What do you mean? Did you say initially?
Yes po, because eventually once Land Bank and DBP, for example, would exit from the special holding company, then eventually that would the share of the of the SHC might probably be more towards private investors already. So in that particular case, it would cease to
Yes.
become a GOCC po.
Yes, of course. If the equity of the government is less than 50%, it will no longer be a government-controlled corporation. But for the record, you're saying it is a GOCC and subject to all the rules of a government-owned and controlled corporation.
There would be certain laws, rules, fund regulations that the SHC is exempt from po.
Like what?
Like for example, the competition law, Philippine competition law.
Is that in the law? Is that provided in the proposed law that there, to exempt the holding company from the application of laws must be very clear in this bill that we are discussing. Because, for example, to what extent is it subjected to COA audit?
Yes po, Senator Drilon. The GOCC will still be subject to COA audit po.
Yes, that is why if you're saying that the intention is to exempt it from certain laws, we would like to know what are these laws where an exemption is sought, so that if we agree, if the Senate and Congress will agree, then we will specify it in the law, and it cannot be presumed. Oh, of course, there are certain limits, as in, for example, COA audit. If it is a government-owned, of course, if the equity is minority, is less than majority, let's say the equity infusion will not even be enough to elect a board member, then certainly that would not be a GOCC. Is that correct? It is only a GOCC to the extent that the equity infusion will result in control by Land Bank and the DBP of the company.
Yes po, Senator.
So that, tama po ba yan? Is that correct?
Yes po, Senator.
Yeah. So that you need not specify in the law certain exemptions if government equity through these GFIs is less than majority. It is not a government-controlled corporation nor a government-owned corporation, and therefore it is not technically a GOCC, which would subject it to the rules and regulations and the laws applicable to ordinary government offices. Is that understanding clear in the law, or it's silent?
Senator, this is Nick again from DBP. Yes, sir, it's in the law. It's provided po that once the SHC does not anymore be majority owned by government, then it does not become a GOCC. It ceases to become a GOCC. It's in the law now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I just pointed it out so that it can be addressed in the committee report, Mr. Chair. The laws are
Thank you, Senator.
the rules are
Thank
clear.
you, Senator.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Amy.
Yes, sorry. Just by way of reminder, we have to take this bills as a whole, and I'd like to remind everyone that in fact in the FIST bill or the special purpose vehicle bills, we were very, very careful about the special purpose vehicles remaining private, despite the fact that government banks and GFIs and GOCCs had poured in all sorts of funding. So, eto po, dapat consistent tayo kasi pangkalahatang rescue package to. May FIST, may guide, may kung ano-ano pa. Kailangan magkapareho naman yata at patas-patas yung mga batas.
Thank you, Senator Amy. In fact, going with the exemptions, in the law, there are 6 exemptions, no? Exempts from law on compensation, position classification, and qualification standards. Exemption to adopt emergency or to qualify to adopt emergency procurement under the Government Procurement Reform Act. Exempts from the GCG. Exemption from the PCC. Exemption from the disposal assets of an investee company. And lastly, this was pointed out by Senator Amy, exemption from ratio ceilings and limitations from the monetary board. So a lot of these exemptions obviously reduces safeguards, no? Especially especially by the limitations by the monetary board, because this affects the fiduciary standing of the bank itself. So I'd like to understand from DBP and Land Bank, since this was opened up by Senator Amy, the exemption from the monetary board. No? This is a very crucial and delicate exemption. Yes, Senator Frank?
Yes, I submit, subject to a more detailed study, that these exemptions enumerated would be needed if the corporation is now coming under the control of this holding company. In other words, the holding company is wholly owned by and capitalized by the GFIs. If the holding company invests in an investee company and the equity does not give it control, my submission is that these exemptions are not necessary, because in the first place they are not applicable to the extent, I take that back, they are not applicable to the extent that it is not a government-owned and controlled corporation. So again, that is subject, as I said, we do not want to unduly restrict the government. The restrictions are well defined in the law, so that in my view, subject to further study, is that the restrictions and the application of these laws would be premised on the control by the government of the investee company. In other words, where the equity is over 50%, then it becomes a GOCC. That's our submission, Mr. Chair, but subject to further study. In other words, you impose the grandfather rule insofar as that is concerned, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would like to again pose the question on the exemption from ratios, ceilings, and limitations. Again, I'm not so clear on why this exemption is needed, because this is a exemption given to the normal operation of the bank. So may I get some answers from DBP and Land Bank?
Good morning again, Senator. On the ratios and exemptions, this actually pertains to how our investment in the special holding company would affect our capital adequacy ratio. Since any investments would affect the computation of such ratios, this exemption would allow the bank actually to continue lending because the ratio would not be compressed because of this investment. So that's just the one of the exemptions considered, and it would be still be under approval of the monetary board naman po. As it mentions here, it as may be determined by the monetary board.
But don't we need this ratios and ceilings to make sure that even though the bank is in effect divesting into the special holding companies, the core mandate of the bank still remains intact and is stable? Yes, Mr. Gonzalo, you're raising your hands. Now you're on mute po, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, the idea is one specific exemption sought is there is generally a 49% ceiling on the ownership that a universal bank such as the land bank can take in a subsidiary. But since the plan is for DBP and land bank to capitalize this the holding company initially na kaming dalawa lang po, lalagpasan po namin, especially by the land bank, that 49% ceiling. And so as shown, kung tig 2.5 billion po ang DBP, 7.5 billion ang land bank, totaling 10, 75% po ang magiging ownership of land bank on the holding company. Now, since gusto pong mag-operate na ito kagad, while we are waiting for the other investors to come in, therefore, we would need that kind of exemption. It is in that sense po yung exemptions that are being sought. Hanggang sa ganun lang naman po.
But if the exemption is limited to just ownership, then we can just specify that in the law, rather than a blanket exemption from the monetary board. That includes when you say ratio ceilings and limitation, that includes risk assessment, risk management, and risk mitigation. And that's precisely what we were talking about earlier, is not to overexpose the bank. And we don't want a scenario wherein the bank keeps on pumping money into this holding company. No? Because that's not the core mandate. This is supposed to be a temporary measure. But the core operations of the bank should remain stable and continue to be adequately protected.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. We submit to that, Senator.
Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Attorney Arifa Ala from the Bangko Sentral.
Yes, Attorney Arifa and then Senator Frank.
Yes. If we notice, Mr. Chair, the provision that is used under Section 18 of the proposed bill is that the monetary board may exempt. So it will be subject to the evaluation of the Bangko Sentral. And when we actually grant exemptions to banking institutions, these are subject to conditions, and these are time-bound. So, for example, the other ceilings not mentioned by my colleagues in DBP, for example, we have also ceiling in terms of the maximum amount of equity investment that the bank can provide, up to 25% of its net worth. So in the past, the monetary board has the authority to grant certain exemptions, but subject to certain conditions, including time-bound limitation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drilon. Senator Frank, you're on mute.
It's a special holding company. Can there be, will the special holding company be open to equity investment from the private sector? Since it is a special holding company? I assume it will be governed by corporation code, etc.
Yes, DOF, you may respond.
That is right, Mr. Senator. And also, and that's on top of the multinationals participation also in the special holding company. Because that would trigger a demonstration effect once we have the likes of ADB, World Bank, IFC also investing in the special holding company.
Yes, but yes. Okay, so is that specified in the law, or is that presumed? What? Because it's very critical to me, Madam. If you allow, if private equity will be allowed, what happens? Assuming that private equity is allowed, would you allow control of the holding company by equity from the private sector, or would you maintain the nature of the special holding company as a GOCC?
Senator, in the bill, what is provided po is that until the GFIs have recovered our investments, the GFI should retain control of the special holding company.
Say it again. Say it again. You were not clear. The transmission was not clear.
Sorry, sir. In the bill po, it provides that until the GFIs have recovered our investments, then the GFI should retain control of the special holding company.
All right. Okay.
Section 9. Senator, that's Section 9C.
Yes, okay.
But to the DBP, there's also another statement after that, no? Or will be able to recover their investments in the special holding company. So, meaning it will retain control until it recovers its investments, or will be able, meaning forward-looking. So, can you elaborate on this next statement? Or will be able to recover their investment in the special holding company?
Yes, sir. I think the intention here, sir, is like, for example, if the SHC invested in preferred shares or in bonds of convertible bonds of an investing company where there is now assured repayment or coupon payments, and we have already seen that the investing company has recovered, then DBP and Land Bank would have already seen that there would have been sufficient cash flows moving forward. Then we can already divest at that time.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you have recovered. Based on the future projection, you can already start reducing your majority stake and allow the private to control the special holding company.
That's correct, Senator.
Okay. But will the diminution of the control affect the cash flows also? Because it will be through the special holding company, meaning the recovery is through the special holding company. Tama po ba?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
To the DBP?
Yeah, that would be form part of the agreements with new investors. Part of it would be actually the sale of DBP and Land Bank's own shares in the SHC. So that would form part of the recovery already.
May I suggest, Mr. Chairman, that this be studied carefully, whether or not, this issue of private equity, because it has a lot of legal effects. Government control is critical, and therefore the issue of investments by the private sector, equity, etc., the rules must be clear. The phrase recovery of investment is so vague, and that it can be interpreted a number of times.
Yes, Senator Drilon. That's why I also put a lot of emphasis on the exit mechanism.
Yes.
Because the exit mechanism, definitely what we want is a clean exit, not a vague exit, because or else we'll be left holding the bag. And we don't want a scenario wherein the GFIs will lose control and will end up holding ownership of distressed companies, which we don't want. So that's also one of the things that we're looking at. Okay. I have a few more questions, but with the indulgence of our senators, there are a few more resource persons in line that we want to acknowledge. The DTI it's also here, and since we are talking about MSMEs, we want to recognize the DTI for their comments.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. The DTI supports likewise the intent of the bill, as long as this will ultimately benefit the MSMEs, which are also affected now by the situation. While the intention is to provide assistance to the SICs, definitely the MSMEs are also part of their supply and value chain. So we are hopeful that with the recovery of the SICs, who are considered to be the flagship companies in the country, will ultimately also facilitate the rebound of our MSMEs. The DTI will be submitting its official position also, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to the. I mentioned earlier there were 6 exemptions, in the law, and I would like to call on some of the agencies that were affected by the exemptions. One of which is the PCC, and they can help us expound the effects of those exemptions. So we call on the PCC for their comments.
Good afternoon, Chair, Senators, everyone. I'm Attorney Jared Rivera from PCC. Joined with me here is Ms. Marianela Gamboa, Senior Economist of PCC. As to the exemption, we would like to suggest that in the language of the bill, that it be identified that the exemption is only for Section 17 of the PCA, specifically on the mandatory notification and review of mergers and acquisition breaching a certain transaction threshold. And that it be specified or not that, because with that identification, it will be clear that the PCC can still exercise its investigative power if entities commit anti-competitive practices under Section 14 and 15 of the Philippine Competition Act. And would also like to suggest that though they are to be exempted, that PCC be consulted on transactions that would otherwise breach the threshold, just to comment on competition matters, so that we can prevent on the potential harm to market competition. So that would be our comment regarding the exemption of PCC.
Question, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Yes, Senator Drilon.
So your position, Mr. Commissioner Rivera, is that it cannot be a general exemption from the Philippine Competition Act, but you are accepting that there can be certain aspects where an exemption can be applied.
Yes, yes, Senator, and it can be inferred from the current language of the law. But just to be extra careful, we would like to identify that the exemption be only on Section 17.
That's correct. So can you submit to the committee a proposed refinement of the general exemption that is presently found in the bill so that we will take into account the position of the PCC?
Noted, Senator. I think we have submitted previously position paper when these bills and similar bills are deliberated in the House, but we'll submit.
Yes, submit it to us. And not only a general position paper, but the specific amendment that you would like to see in the law as passed in the House, unless you're saying that you can adopt the law or the bill that was adopted in the House. Anyway, and that's just my point.
We will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, para po hindi kami magkamali, we would like to see, coming from you, how it should be worded, because this is the anti-competition, the Philippine Competition Commission would have a role here. That's what, so, pwede po ba yan? Can you submit it to us for the consideration of the subcommittee?
Yes, yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drilon. Attorney Jared, no, there's a provision here, no, a proviso, in fact, in the exemption. And let me just read, provided that this exemption shall only apply to acquisition of assets of an investee company by the SHC pursuant to its powers under this act. What's the effect of this exemption? Because this gives exemption to the assets being bought by the investee company. So what's the effect of this?
Mr. Chair, I would like to, or we would like to further elaborate that on the position paper that we will submit, for just to be sure and just to be cohesive with our general position.
It's my first instance when I read this. Is the investee company can buy out certain assets, increase its size without going through any competition analysis. So we don't want a scenario wherein we're talking about strategically important companies. Though these companies are supposed to be few and important to our economy and probably large in size. So if they will not be under scrutiny of our competition agency, then we don't want a scenario wherein they will buy assets and diminish competition in that particular sector. That's my initial reading of this.
Yes, Senator. On our comments, we will be suggesting that just a review of the PCC. So we will be allowed to provide our comments and our perspective on the possible, not really requiring them to undergo review, but for us to comment on the transaction. But we'll elaborate this more on our position paper.
Yeah, but maybe here DBP or Land Bank on the logic why this proviso was included in the exemption.
Yeah.
Go ahead po.
In relation po to the competition, because we envision a scenario where there might be a possibility where the SHC would be investing in let's say 2 companies in the same industry, and so there might be a question of let's say on the part of the SHC that there would be a monopoly or whatnot. Although we do submit that there's no intention to control these companies anyway. But insofar as it might reach the thresholds provided by the PCC, and as time is of the essence in terms of these investments, we would submit that these be exempted from that particular requirement, but noting that comments from the PCC and notification to the PCC would still be provided.
I see the need, no, for an expedited process. However, in this proviso, it's an exemption on the acquisition of assets of an investee company. So it's not even about the notification, but on the acquisition of assets already of the investee company, not the special holding company.
Right.
SHC acquired assets.
Maybe to clarify, Senator, it's the acquisition by the SHC of assets of the investee company. So actually, in relation to shares, maybe that can be clarified.
Yes, I think we should clarify this provision, no, because in my reading, it's the investee company that is being exempted.
Noted on that, sir. We will improve the language.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. We also want to call on the GCG.
Good morning, Chairman and Senators. I'm Director Jean Tupas of the Corporate Governance Office of the Governance Commission for GOCCs. So the Governance Commission fully supports the legislative measure to provide timely and effective assistance to micro, small, and medium enterprises and strategically important industries affected by the current COVID-19 pandemic, specifically those facing solvency issues. We note that Senate Bills number 2003 and 2048 and House Bill number 7749 seeks to create a special holding company or SHC, which will be a government-owned or controlled corporation or GOCC. However, we also note that the said bills call for the exemption of the SHC from the provisions of Republic Act number 10149 or the GOCC Governance Act of 2011, which is the charter of the Governance Commission. Moreover, the said bills likewise contain a provision on the board composition of the SHC, in which the procedure of appointing directors in the board was likewise provided. Also, we note that the bills provide the board with powers to fix the compensation plan of the employees and officers of the SHC, and the SHC shall be exempt from existing laws and the rules and regulations on compensation, position classification, and qualification standards in the government service. Once these bills are passed into law, the Governance Commission shall monitor the land banks and DBP's compliance of their obligations therein to ensure that the amounts allocated by land bank and DBP for loans shall reach the MSME sector. With the above, the Governance Commission manifests that it will be submitting before the committees its detailed position paper on the proposed bills being discussed as soon as possible, Mr. Chair.
But any comment on the exemption? The exemption to the GOCC Governance Act of 2001. What are the adverse, or if there are no adverse consequences of that exemption?
Initially, Mr. Chair, we see that the procedure for the appointment of the members of the board, there's no specific indication on whether this should pass through the fit and proper rule of the Governance Commission, and whether the appointive members of the board shall be appointed by the President. So in this provision, Mr. Chair, we will be providing our proposed amendments on the said provision.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. We call on COA, the Commission on Audit. We call on the representatives of the Commission on Audit. Ano pa ba? Anyone from COA? Wala. Well, we'll try to reach out to COA, but since they're not responding, we call on the BIR for their comments. Any comments from the BIR? Considering there'll be a tax reprieve that will be given. Oh, COA? Is COA there already? Attorney Quijano?
Good morning, Your Honor.
Yes, go ahead po.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm from the Commission and Audit Legal Affairs Office.
Yes.
And we already sent our letter yesterday. Our Chairman Michael Aguinaldo could not join the teleconference because of a previous commitment. But we are already in the process of consolidating all the comments of the concerned audit clusters of the Commission. So as to the submission of the position paper of the Commission, we will be sending it as soon as possible, as soon as we finalize it. But we are in full support of the intent of the proposed Senate bills, Your Honor.
I just have one question. In letter C or letter E of the bill, there's also a proviso here that the audit of the special holding company by COA shall not preclude the special holding company from engaging services of a private auditing firm when equity participation in the special holding companies offered to private investors. So meaning they can engage a private auditing firm, even though government still has majority control of the special holding company. My question is, has this scenario been? Have you ever had this type of scenario wherein COA is the auditor of that GOCC, and then there's a private auditing firm that was hired to also conduct audit?
Sir, I will give the floor to Attorney Fabian de los Santos.
And yes, in relation to that, Mr. Chair, I wonder why is there such rule? Firstly, I do not know whether there is that particular provision in the other charters of the GOCCs, because under the Constitution, the jurisdiction of the COA would include government-owned and controlled corporation. If I understand the chairman correctly, what the proposed law will say is it is without prejudice to hiring private auditors. Two questions. Number one, why is this so? Why do we need this? Wouldn't it just cause confusion on the financial state of the GOCC? Number two, I do not know if this is allowed as a matter of policy and as a matter of constitutional restriction. I have no answer to my question. Is the jurisdiction of COA exclusive? Yes. So what will this private auditing firm perform or do?
That's precisely my question also, Senator Drilon, because especially in audit, different auditing firms sometimes have different appreciation of the results. We know in a scenario wherein the private firm will have a different appreciation and COA will have a different appreciation. So I'm just wondering if this this type of engagement has been engaged in the past by other GOCCs. I want to ask COA if they have any experience on this type of arrangements.
Yeah. Is COA around?
Attorney Quijano was the one who responded earlier. Is she still there?
Your Honor, we are in the process of reviewing the provisions of the Senate bills. As to the auditing, I'm already contacting Attorney Fabian de los Santos of the Office of the Director to comment on the matter because it is in the audit of the corporate government sector of COA.
Attorney, you have to review this also because in the
Yes,
in
Your
that provision, there's also another proviso, and let me just read. Provided further that even if the services of the latter, which is the private, are availed of, the audit report of COA shall serve as the report for purposes of compliance. So COA will be relegated to just for compliance. No? So again, no, we don't want a scenario wherein there will be two audit reports that are reporting different details. And I just want to get a comment from COA that the COA report will be relegated to just compliance purposes. No, I just want to get a comment on that.
Yes, Your Honor, we will be submitting our final position paper as soon as it is we have consolidated all the comments from the different government sectors.
Pag-ingatan po natin yan, Mr. Chairman. Pag-ingatan po natin that the COA audit will just be for purposes of compliance. What does that exactly mean, and why is that being inserted there? What is the purpose? Because the power of the COA is constitutional, defined in the Constitution. It's not defined by law. And therefore, and it covers government-owned and controlled corporation. The only exception from COA is if the equity is less than 50%. But if it is more than 50%, 50.1, that's already the jurisdiction of the COA is exclusive. I do not know what this auditing done by a private auditor, what purpose it would serve. We better be careful about this because just sitting here, I do not know what are the implications.
Would like to request from COA to give us aside from the position paper, to join us on the next hearing to voice out your opinion and to put it on record so that we'll be guided accordingly. No, this is a very important provision and the sensitivities that come with it. Yes, to DBP.
Senator, just to clarify, I think the intention of this provision is that the COA finding will prevail. So it is not just mere compliance, but it would prevail over whatever the finding is or the audit of the private firm would be. Maybe just to give some context, we understand that some of the private investors, particularly our multilaterals, would sometimes want an independent audit of the firm, which in this case, kasi since COA is government, there might be a request for a third party to do it as well on their end, particularly to meet certain timelines or deadlines on the auditing side. But again, just to clarify, the intention is that the COA finding will prevail insofar as any final audits would be done. Thank you, sir.
Yes, yes, Mr. Chair. Can we respond to that?
Yes, Senator Drilon.
Yes. If it is a requirement, let's say, of a prospective investor like multinationals or lenders, that a separate audit be done, let that be funded and let that be funded by the one who is requesting for a special audit so that the COA's finding is the one controlling, and no doubt, because the danger of having a second opinion, audit report is at the very least, if there is no uniformity, doubt is thrown on the COA audit report. And that is the last thing we would like to do. Now, so if that is, and I'm sure this is happening, if the prospective, let's say, the prospective investor or purchaser of an asset or an equity would like a separate audit, let it be done, but that should be funded by the third party, and in that sense, is not an audit finding of an auditor hired or engaged by the GOCC or by the special holding company.
We note the suggestion of the good senator, and we shall submit a recommendation on the revised language to include such provisions, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We go on to the BIR, represented by Deputy Commissioner Marisa Cabreros.
Good afternoon, Senator, Your Honor. Allow me to read the position statement of our Commissioner, Cesar Billy Dulay. The Bureau of Internal Revenue supports the passage of the Government Financial Institutions Unified Initiatives to Distressed Enterprises for Economic Recovery Act, or the GUIDE Act. We believe that providing needed access to credit and financial assistance to distressed businesses, including MSMEs, strategically important companies, and other businesses affected by COVID-19 pandemic, will encourage these enterprises to continue their operations and to maintain employment levels, which are critical to reinvigorate the economy. In the said bills, tax exemptions and fee privileges will be provided to DBP and Land Bank to lower overall cost of borrowing by MSMEs and to assist the rehabilitation of SICs affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, which are experiencing temporary solvency issues. Although the proposed measure will have an impact on revenues to be collected by the government, this is far outweighed by the opportunity it will promote businesses, particularly MSMEs and SICs, to recover, resulting to an increase in economic activities. Finally, we are one with the Department of Finance and other government agencies in calling for the immediate passage of the bills. Once passed into law, rest assured that the Bureau will timely issue the necessary revenue issuances to effectively implement the tax provisions thereof. Your Honor, we shall be submitting an official copy of this statement of support signed by our Commissioner, Cesar Billy Dulay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. We now call on the DBM. Further comments? Nandyan? We call on the DBM. If not, while we track down the DBM, we call on the Department of Agriculture, since Land Bank will be extending loans to MSMEs in the agribusiness sector. So we want to call on the DA to give their comments on the bill.
Yes, sir. This is Jocelyn Badjola, the Executive Director of the Agricultural Credit Policy Council. Generally, sir, we support the objectives of the bill since it aims to help our MSMEs in distress, and these MSMEs play a crucial role in food security. However, there is a specific provision on the proposed rediscounting mechanisms by DBP, and ACPC was mentioned. We are afraid that it may not apply to ACPC since ACPC is not a financial institution. It is not a corporation, but a line agency. If you would allow us, sir, we would expound more on this in our official position paper as soon as cleared by Secretary Dar, and we will be sending them the paper to you as soon as as soon as cleared by Secretary Dar.
Yeah, but your mandate is to give loans, correct?
Yes, sir. But we do not lend directly, sir. We tap lending conduits, particularly banks and cooperatives.
Yeah, but the essence here is for you to be able to rediscount your loan.
Sorry, notes. The problem, sir, is the fund is owned by ACPC. There is no creditor-debtor relationship between ACPC and our conduits because we tap them as we call them as agent conduits. We tap their expertise in evaluating and deciding on loan applications as well as loan collection and disbursement. Other than that, hindi po pautang ng ACPC to our lending conduit. So yung promissory notes that they issue in the name of the end borrowers do not belong to them. It belongs to the AACPC. So they
Okay,
cannot use that as collateral when they in case they want to apply for rediscounting.
So ACPC in effect just guarantees.
Do
you guarantee?
No, sir. There's AGFP. That's a different. It's a different.
But do you extend? But you don't extend loans.
No, sir. We use our funds and our terms and conditions as approved by the council, and we tap conduits that agree to comply with those terms and conditions, such as zero interest rate, no collateral, but they disburse our funds for a fee. So they charge a one-time service fee, sir.
So your funds are given as a grant.
No, sir. It's credit.
It's credit pa rin. So
Credit pa rin. So, kinokolekta po ito ng conduits tapos pinoplow back po doon sa pondo. So we are able to relend again.
Well, from my understanding, you can still rediscount those amounts that you have disbursed because they are treated as loans, accounts receivable yun.
We will consult, sir, with kukonsultahon po namin yung aming legal team, and then we will come up with a final our final position paper, sir.
All right, thank you for that. We also call on the CSC. Unfortunately, the CSC is no longer here with us, but they are also one of those agencies that were exempted. We call on the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to, on behalf of the SEC, Mr. Chairman, we'd like to thank the Honorable Senate Committees for allowing us to participate in today's hearing. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has gravely affected the Philippine economy. And the bills at hand are focused on MSMEs and strategically important companies. In one part, the guide bills expand the loans assistance program to key sectors badly hit by the pandemic, including infrastructure, service industry, manufacturing, and the agribusiness value chain. On the other hand, they also call for a creation of a special holding company for the purpose of rehabilitating strategically important companies that are experiencing liquidity issues due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Among these industries are those engaged in agriculture, infrastructure, services, and manufacturing. With all these in mind, the SEC fully supports the bills as they aim to provide financial assistance to distressed MSMEs and strategically important companies that were badly hit by the pandemic, particularly addressing their liquidity issues. We will give our full cooperation on these matters, Mr. Chairman, and respond to any requests or questions that the committees may propose. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the SEC. We have already exhausted all of our resource persons except for CSC, but we will call on them later on. In the next hearing, we will be inviting the private sector also to give their comments, especially to the group of the MSMEs and also the other companies that are included in the specific industries that were mentioned in the law. With that, are there any more questions from our senator? Senator Frank, do you have any more issues to propound?
Yeah, no, just I would like to think that, given the magnitude of the problem, the amount may not be that significant in terms of being able to achieve the intended purpose. Can we ask whoever to give us a review of whether or not 10 billion is sufficient? I mean, from an objective point of view. Ano ba magagawa nitong 10 billion in the context of where we are today? So we will need the Department of Finance and whosoever to give us a reading of this. They're saying, is this enough to achieve the purpose of helping our industries, particularly the small and medium scale industries?
May we have a response from the DOF?
They don't have to respond now, sir.
Okay.
They can respond in the next. Next.
Well, that is my question earlier, Senator Frank. The 10 billion that let's treat this 10 billion as an investment, and in any investment, there should be a return, whether from a social point of view or a financial point of view, and that's what we are trying to get after, so that we will understand fully how these investments will help stop the bleeding and recover our economy as quick as possible. But 10 billion to a 1.5 trillion loss, because our economy lost 1.5 trillion last year. It's not even 1%. No, so that's how the magnitude. If you compare it to that 2020 loss. You're right, Senator Frank. It's not even, we cannot even call it a drop in the bucket, no. So,
that if we are looking at a vaccination of 70 million Filipinos, 45,000, I cannot even imagine what percentage that is. 45,000 Filipinos who have been vaccinated is insignificant if we are looking at vaccinate as a vaccine program for 70 million Filipinos. In the same vein, we talk about a loss to the economy of 1 point something trillion. What is 10 billion? I mean, so those are just policy issues which I want the Secretary of Finance and the DOF to address in the next hearing.
Thank you, Senator Frank. Senator Amy, any comments before we terminate the first hearing?
No more, thank you. I think we've definitely asked all the questions, so we've raised the level of confusion. That's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Amy. I don't see Senator Villar in the screen anymore, so she probably went off. But to the DOF, DBP, Land Bank, and NEDA, you're here since the beginning and you've heard the discussions earlier and the concerns, especially on the safeguards. I think the concern will revolve around, number one, the impact to the economy, as well as the impact to the recovery program of the government. Then number two, the safeguards that should be put in place in order to make sure that the investments made will not be put to waste and abused. And then number three are the suggestions to clarify some of the provisions in the law. So please take note of that. We will discuss those items further in the next hearing, which is March 17, Wednesday. Together in that hearing, we will be inviting some private sector participants to give their comments also on the said matter. So with that, I would like to thank Senator Amy and Senator Frank. Senator Frank, you have I don't know if that is a actual aquarium or that's a virtual background. I was trying to figure out whether, because you usually have a different background. So you're on mute, Sen Frank. Naka-mute
What's
siya.
that? So cute.
That's actual. That's actual. That's an
Yeah,
actual.
they're moving.
Ah, yeah.
They're moving.
Yes. Just as an aside, anyway, we have adjourned. The daughter of my staff had to stop the video because her daughter kept on counting the fish.
I was trying to figure out whether that's a virtual background or an actual aquarium, but it's a different background compared to the one you used to flash
Yes.
with us.
It's an actual aquarium.
Thank you for the participation of our good minority floor, and of course to one of the proponents, the chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee. So thank you very much. We'll suspend this hearing until March 17 next Wednesday. Thank you very much.
Happy weekend.